The rain was coming down so hard it felt like the sky was trying to drown the world. Each drop slammed against the windshield like tiny bullets, the kind you hear in war movies right before everything goes black. But I couldn't stop driving. Not tonight. Not after what I saw. My hands trembled on the steering wheel as I stared through the blur of water and headlights. The quiet roads of Willow Harbor usually soothed me. Tonight, they felt like a maze leading me straight into someone else's nightmare. I kept replaying it in my mind. The gunshots, the flash of steel, the man collapsing onto the wet pavement like a giant whose strings had been cut, and me, standing there like a fool, clutching my grocery bag that now lay abandoned on the ground, apples rolling into a puddle, my scream trapped inside my throat.
I didn't know who he was, not then.
I didn't know why men with tattoos on their faces were trying to drag him into the back of a black van.
I didn't know anything.
All I knew was this.
He was bleeding out.
And no one else was going to save him. People always say that when danger appears, your instincts kick in, fight, flight, or freeze. Mine did none of those. Mine whispered, save him. So I did. I still remember the weight of him as he slumped against me, the warmth of his blood soaking through my shirt, the ragged sound of his breath, his eyes, dark, fading, desperate. Please don't let them take me, he gasped, his voice heavy with an accent I couldn't place. I didn't respond. I just pulled him behind my car, pressed my shaking hands against the wound in his side, and prayed to every force in the universe that I wouldn't watch a stranger die in my arms. Sirens?
No.
Help?
None.
Just me, a man I didn't know, and a choice that could destroy my life. I should have run. Any sane person would have run. Instead, I dragged him into my car and sped off toward my house like my soul depended on it. And maybe it did. By the time I reached my driveway, my heart wasn't beating normally anymore. It was pounding, loud enough to fill the silence of the night. I threw open the passenger door and tried to help the man out, but his body sagged, heavy and unresponsive. I need you to stay awake, I whispered. Please stay with me. His eyelids fluttered, his breath shallow. You don't understand, he coughed, and I felt warm blood hit my wrist. You have no idea who I am. No, I whispered, and I don't care.
He wasn't expecting that.
I saw it in the flicker of surprise before he slipped out of consciousness. I hauled him inside, over the carpet, past the bookshelf, into my tiny living room where my medical kit sat under the coffee table. I wasn't a doctor, but I knew wounds. I'd studied emergency medicine for 2 years before dropping out. Life had gotten complicated. Dreams had become too heavy to carry.
But the knowledge?
That stayed with me. I stabilized him as best as I could, cleaned the wound, applied pressure dressings, used my last remaining vial of lidocaine to numb the deep gash where the bullet had grazed him. My hands moved on their own, like muscle memory was guiding me, like some part of me had been waiting for this moment. Hours passed. Rain kept falling. Thunder kept threatening. And finally, after what felt like an eternity, his breathing steadied.
He lived.
But I didn't sleep. Not even when the storm quieted. Because the moment his breathing evened out, the weight of reality crashed into me like a tidal wave.
Who was he?
Why were armed men chasing him? What had I gotten myself into? And perhaps the worst thought, what if they come looking for him? That fear gnawed at me until dawn. The next morning started too quietly. I walked to the window, rubbing my temples after a night of no sleep. Birds should have been chirping. Cars should have been rolling by on their way to work. But everything felt wrong.
Too still.
Too controlled. Too watched. I drew back the curtain, and my breath left my body. My small cul-de-sac in Willow Harbor, usually empty except for tired neighbors and dog walkers, was filled, packed, with black SUVs, motorcycles, and armed men in dark suits that made them look like shadows brought to life. Not 10 men. Not 20. At least 200. They stood shoulder to shoulder, methodically surrounding my home, blocking every exit, every inch of yard, every possible escape route. Some had rifles. Some had earpieces. Some simply stood with their arms crossed, watching my windows like hawks hunting prey. My heart lurched. My knees nearly buckled. What is this? I whispered to no one. Then I saw him. A man stepped forward from the largest SUV.
Tall. Sharp jaw.
Eyes like steel. Suit perfectly tailored. Expression unreadable. He looked like someone used to command armies with a single word. And he wasn't looking at my house.
He was looking directly at me.
Right through the window. He lifted his hand, pointed at my front door. And suddenly, all 200 men shifted, as if obeying an unspoken order. Then someone pounded on my door. "Open up," a deep voice commanded. "We're here for our Don's father." My stomach dropped so hard I almost collapsed. The man sleeping on my living room couch wasn't a random stranger. He was the father of a mafia boss, and I had saved his life. As the pounding on the door continued, I felt my world tilt sideways. Fear pressed against my ribs like a physical weight. The air felt too tight to breathe. What do you do when kindness pulls you into the heart of danger? And more importantly, if you were in my place, would you open the door? What would you do if 200 mafia men surrounded your house the morning after you saved a stranger's life? Comment below. I want to hear your instincts. Before we dive deeper into the story, take a moment to hit that like button if you love suspenseful, emotional stories that keep you on the edge of your seat. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next thrilling chapter. We also want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Whether it's your city, your country, or even just your favorite spot to watch these stories, we love connecting with our global audience. Now let's get back to the story and see just how far courage can take someone when danger is closing in. The pounding on my front door didn't stop. It grew deeper, heavier, more demanding, as if they intended to break the entire house down if I didn't respond fast enough. My pulse thudded hard against my throat. I peeked once more through the window. The street was a sea of armed men. Black gloves, tactical boots, weapons slung across broad shoulders. This wasn't the police. This wasn't a gang. This was something organized, controlled, dangerous. And every single one of them was here because of the unconscious man lying on my couch. I swallowed hard, forced myself to breathe, and stepped away from the window. My fingers trembled as I brushed a pair of loose curls out of my face. I wasn't dressed for this. Not for anything involving 200 men who looked like they'd walked straight out of a mafia thriller. I still had on last night's soaked jeans and one of my old oversized sweatshirts, stained dark where his blood had soaked into the fabric. Another violent knock made me flinch. "Ma'am," a voice called out, firm, steady, accented. "We mean you no harm. But open this door now."
Right.
"No harm," he said, while 200 men stood outside armed to the teeth. I looked back at the stranger on my couch. His breathing was shallow but steady. His face had regained a little color. The wound was wrapped in layers of gauze I prayed would hold a little longer. He looked older up close, late 60s, maybe, with streaks of steel gray hair at his temples. A father. A grandfather, even. And apparently the father of a mafia don. I pressed a hand to my forehead. "What have I done?" I whispered. It wasn't regret. Not fully. More like the dawning realization that I had stepped into a storm I didn't understand. I hesitated for 3 more seconds, then forced myself forward. I unlocked the deadbolt, turned the knob. The moment the door cracked open, even a fraction, the men outside shifted like one body, boots crunching in sync. A tall man caught the door before I could open it fully. He pushed it wider with slow, deliberate control, making sure I couldn't slam it shut. He stepped inside. Just one man. But he felt like a tidal wave.
Tall.
Powerful. Broad shoulders shaping his suit. His dark hair slicked back, jaw tight, eyes sharp with a kind of intelligence that felt dangerous. His presence filled the entire entryway, despite the fact that he moved in complete silence. He didn't look away from me, not even for a second. For a moment, the air between us thickened, fear on my side, calculation on his. Then he spoke. "Where is he?" His voice was deep, accented, smooth enough to sound calm, but heavy enough to feel like a command wrapped in velvet. I swallowed hard. He's inside," I whispered. His eyebrow lifted a fraction, either relief or suspicion. I couldn't tell. "Alive?"
Yes.
"I think so." He nodded once, sharply, as if confirming something important. Then he stepped past me. 2 more men followed, massive, quiet, with expressions carved from stone. They closed the door behind them as the rest of the army remained outside, a silent fortress. I stayed rooted to the floor, unable to decide whether I should run, faint, or apologize for existing. The man with the slicked-back hair walked into my living room, his men on either side. When he saw the older man on my couch, his entire body changed. His jaw tensed. Something flickered in his eyes. Pain? Fear? Relief? His steps slowed, and he inhaled painfully deep. Then he spoke something in another language, Italian maybe, and the 2 men behind him spread into action. "Vitals," one murmured. "Oxygen," the other said. They kneeled by the couch like trained medics and carefully inspected the wound dressings. The tall man turned back to me. "What happened?" Not an accusation. Not yet. More like a demand for the truth. I cleared my throat, trying to steady my voice. I was coming back from the store. I saw 2 men trying to drag him into a van. He was bleeding. I didn't know who he was. I just helped. He took a step closer. Too close. Close enough that I could feel the gravity of him, something dark and powerful that made my nerves light up in warning and fascination at the same time. "You dragged my father out of the hands of men who wanted to execute him," he said quietly, "and brought him into your own home." The weight of that sentence pressed down on me, almost suffocating. Before I could respond, one of the medics spoke. "He's stable," the man said. If she hadn't intervened, he would have died within minutes. The tall man's gaze didn't leave mine.
He didn't blink.
He didn't breathe. He simply absorbed the words, then let out a slow, heavy exhale, like someone realizing they had been seconds away from losing everything. Through clenched teeth, he whispered something again in Italian. Something that sounded like gratitude wrapped in grief.
He faced me fully then.
"What's your name?" His tone wasn't exactly gentle, but it wasn't harsh either. It was the voice of someone used to giving orders but trying just barely not to intimidate me. "Ariana," I said softly. He repeated it once under his breath. "Ariana." Then, after a moment, "I am Lorenzo De Luca." The name hit me like a punch. I knew that name. Everyone in Willow Harbor did. The De Lucas weren't just a powerful family. They were the family. The shadowed name whispered in restaurants, in barbershops, in real estate offices. The name that came up whenever something expensive was built or something violent happened in the city's underbelly. And the man lying on my couch right now is Angelo De Luca, Lorenzo finished, answering the question I couldn't speak. His father. The patriarch. The Don's father. My throat tightened. I had saved the life of one of the most dangerous men in the state. And now his son, arguably more dangerous, was standing inches from me, staring into me like he could see every secret I'd ever kept. You protected my father at great risk to yourself, he said. Not a compliment. Not yet. More like he was trying to understand what kind of person I was. I looked down, clasping my fingers together. I just did what I could. Anyone would've. No, he cut in sharply. Most people would have walked away. The room fell silent. Then something I didn't expect happened. Lorenzo stepped back and bowed his head slightly. Not fully. Not dramatically. Just a small, controlled, respectful nod. Thank you. The words sounded foreign in his mouth, like he wasn't used to saying them. Before I could respond, the side door burst open and two more men rushed in, holding a tablet, speaking urgently in rapid Italian. Lorenzo's entire expression hardened. They found the shooter, one said. And they know he survived, said the other. Lorenzo turned to me again, and this time, his expression had changed. Gone was the gratitude. Gone was the calm. What replaced it chilled me to my core. Ariana, he said slowly, voice tightening, because you saved my father. They are now coming for you. My stomach dropped. I backed up a step without realizing it. What?
Why? I didn't.
You interfered, he said. You were a witness. You disrupted their plan. And now, they will not let you live. My breath stilled. And that, Lorenzo added, is why 200 of my men are surrounding your home. The realization hit like thunder. They weren't here to intimidate me. They were here to protect me. Lorenzo's words echoed through my living room, bouncing off the walls and settling in my bones like ice. They will not let you live. My legs felt weak, and I gripped the edge of the small table beside me just to stay upright. Everything inside me wanted to reject the idea. It didn't feel real. 10 hours ago, I was comparing prices on apples at the grocery store. Now I was apparently a target for professional killers? No, I whispered, shaking my head. No, that can't be. I didn't even see their faces. You saw enough, Lorenzo answered. And more importantly, you pulled my father away. That is a message in itself. I swallowed hard. A message? What message? That you are willing to interfere with their agenda, he said, his voice low. And trust me, they will punish that. The room felt like it was shrinking around me. I looked toward the couch where Angelo de Luca lay unconscious. The medics were still working on him, adjusting dressings, checking vitals, ensuring he stayed stable. The man I saved. The man whose blood was still dried on my skin. I didn't regret what I did. But I also hadn't expected to stand here, facing the consequences like this. Lorenzo stepped closer. You are not safe here, he said firmly. Not in this house. Not on this street. Not anywhere near your normal life. Fear crawled up my spine. Then, what do you want me to do? He studied me for a long moment, his eyes sharp, calculating. Not in a cold way, more like a man used to assessing every threat, every angle, every ripple of danger. And I was a ripple now. You're coming with us, he said. My breath hitched. What?
No.
I can't just leave. My job, my classes, my life. You won't have a life if you stay here, he interrupted. Harsh. Blunt. But not unkind. Just honest in the way men like him were forced to be. Before I could gather a proper argument, the door to the backyard slammed open and another guard rushed in, speaking urgently. They're on the move, he said. They know she brought him here. They're watching the neighborhood. My stomach flipped. Lorenzo looked at me again. Ariana, I do not have time to convince you, he said. Only to keep you alive. One of the medics spoke up then. Boss, We can transport him safely now. He's stable enough. Lorenzo nodded, jaw tight, then turned back to me with a dangerous softness in his voice. We leave in 3 minutes. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He didn't have to, because underneath the calm was the truth. Those 3 minutes might be all I had left before danger closed in. The house exploded into motion. 2 guards swept in, securing windows, pulling curtains, scanning corners. Others poured inside with medical equipment, stretching a small emergency gurney to carry Angelo. Every movement was swift, silent, precise. It was like watching a well-oiled machine, one that had done this 100 times. I stood frozen in the chaos until a man with a scar over his eyebrows stopped in front of me and pressed a jacket into my hands. "Wear this," he said. "Cover yourself. Do not let anyone see your face." I didn't even ask questions. I slipped the heavy black jacket on, pulling the hood up as he instructed. My hands trembled as I zipped it. Another man handed me a pair of gloves. "Don't leave fingerprints. They might be tracking." Tracking. Fingerprints. My life had turned into a crime documentary in 12 hours. Lorenzo was by the door now, talking rapidly to 3 men in Italian. Orders. Locations. Strategy. His presence commanded the entire atmosphere, even when he spoke quietly. He felt like a storm in a suit, contained, but always seconds away from unleashing power.
Then he looked at me.
And everything slowed. "Stay close to me," he said. "Do not step away. Not for a second." His tone wasn't harsh. It wasn't domineering. It was protective. And that terrified me even more. Because some instinct deep inside whispered that this man wasn't just used to protecting people. He was used to losing them. The moment the door opened, the world outside shifted. The 200 men who surrounded my house turned in unison, their eyes snapping to Lorenzo. The entire army moved as one body, closing ranks, forming barricades, creating a hallway made of muscle and weapons for us to walk through. Snow had begun to fall, light flakes dancing in the cold morning air, settling on black suits and gun barrels. Angelo was rolled out first, strapped to the mobile stretcher, covered with a heavy blanket. Medics flanked him on both sides. Exits were covered. Radios crackled. Men scanned rooftops, yards, windows. They weren't dramatic. They weren't chaotic. They were prepared. Efficient.
Deadly.
And then it hit me. This wasn't just a crime family. This was an empire. Lorenzo placed a guiding hand at my back, steering me forward. The touch was firm but surprisingly gentle, like he was conscious of every place I might feel overwhelmed. "Don't look around," he murmured. "Just walk." But I couldn't help it. Every few steps, I glanced toward the edges of the street, toward the shadows between houses, the glint of metal in the distance, the faint movement of someone watching us. Danger was everywhere. "You're shaking," Lorenzo said quietly. "I'm not used to having hitmen watching me," I whispered back. His mouth twitched, almost a smile, but not quite. "Stick with me. They wouldn't dare touch you." But I didn't feel protected. Not yet. I felt exposed, like a single spark in a field full of gunpowder. We reached the armored SUV, at the center of the formation. Lorenzo opened the door for me himself. "Inside," he said. I hesitated only one breath before climbing in. The interior was dark leather, clean, and unfortunately intimidating. It smelled like cedar and gun oil, and something faintly expensive. Lorenzo climbed in beside me, closing the door with a heavy thump that sealed out the noise of the world. 3 more SUVs closed in around us. Engines rumbled to life. Through the tinted windows, I could barely see the silhouettes of men taking positions on motorcycles and rooftop vehicles. "We're taking you to a safe house," Lorenzo said, adjusting his cuffs with the same calm he'd probably use ordering espresso. "I've never been to a safe house," I murmured. "You've never needed one before today."
Fair.
The SUV pulled forward, the convoy moving in perfect synchronization. As we turned onto the main road, I glanced back through the window at my little house. My plants in the windowsill. My porch light still on from the night before. My cozy life. Quiet, predictable, safe. Now it felt like a stranger's home. "It'll be okay," Lorenzo said, his voice unexpectedly soft. I turned to him. "Will it?" He held my gaze.
Yes.
"Because I'm not letting anything happen to you." And for the first time since this nightmare began, I believed him. But the world didn't. A second later, a bullet slammed into the SUV's reinforced window. Another, and another, like hail made of violence. Lorenzo's expression hardened instantly. "They found us," he growled. "Ariana down." The convoy swerved. Engines roared. Gunfire exploded into the air. And just like that, my life truly changed forever. Gunfire is nothing like the movies. It isn't clean. It isn't rhythmic. It isn't cinematic. It's chaotic, raw, sharp noise that slices through the air and lodges itself deep in your chest, vibrating through every nerve. When the first bullet struck the SUV's reinforced glass, I felt it in my teeth. Lorenzo reacted instantly. Not with panic. Not even with surprise. Just dominance. "Get her down," he barked. One of the guards in the front seat reached back and pushed my head lower, shielding me with his body as Lorenzo pressed me into the floorboard. I felt the weight of him above me. Strong, steady, controlled, like a shield made of warm muscle and absolute authority. The convoy roared forward, engines growling like beasts unleashed. Tires screeched. Metal clashed. Shouts echoed through the radio. 3 vehicles at our 6. They're flanking left side. Rooftop sniper. 11 o'clock. My heart hammered so fast it hurt. "Lorenzo." I choked out. "I'm here," he said, his hand gripping my shoulder, keeping me down but not hurting me. "Do not move. Do not look up. I've never." "I know." His voice softened by a fraction. "Just breathe. Just breathe."
Right.
As if breathing wasn't the hardest thing in the world right now. The SUV jerked hard left, then right, avoiding something I couldn't see. Lorenzo shifted to brace me, his chest pressing against my back. His heartbeat, steady, powerful, contrasted wildly with my own frantic rhythm. "We're losing the trail. 2 hostiles down," a voice shouted through the comm. "Keep the perimeter tight," Lorenzo commanded. "No one lays a finger on her." My stomach tightened. On her.
Me.
Despite everything, every instinct screaming in fear, a tiny heat bloomed in my chest at the way he said it. Possessive. Protective. Unquestioning. The gunfire slowed, then stopped. The SUVs didn't. They kept moving.
Fast.
Controlled. Finally, after an agonizing minute, Lorenzo spoke again. "It's over," he said quietly. But he didn't move off me. Neither did I. Because even though the world had stopped trying to kill us, my body hadn't caught up. My hands shook uncontrollably. My breath came in sharp, broken fragments. Lorenzo noticed. He shifted slightly, easing some pressure, while still sheltering me with his body. "Ariana," he murmured. "You're safe." Safe. That word felt too fragile.
Too thin.
I've never been shot at before," I whispered. He finally lifted himself enough for me to sit up a little, but stayed close, his hand braced near my waist to steady me. "I know," he said again. "Most people never are. And none should be." His voice wasn't cold anymore. It wasn't commanding. It was human. The kind of voice someone uses when they've seen too much loss and fought too hard to protect what's left. I stared out the tinted window. The scenery blurred past, empty roads, old warehouses, distant smokestacks. We weren't in Willow Harbor anymore. "Where are we going?" asked, my voice shaky. "A location no one but my family knows," Lorenzo said. "A place built for emergencies. You'll be safe there." That word again. Safe. Was that even possible anymore? I pressed my hand against my chest, trying to steady myself. "I can't believe this is happening." Lorenzo leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You are alive because you acted when no one else would," he said. "That bravery comes with consequences, but also with protection." I looked up at him, finally meeting his gaze. "Why are they targeting me? I mean, I didn't do anything wrong." "They don't need you to be guilty," he said quietly. "They just need you to be useful or dangerous." My throat tightened. "And which one am I?" His jaw clenched. "To them, dangerous. Because you saved my father's life. Because you witnessed an ambush meant to cripple my family. Because your existence now disrupts their plans."
He paused.
"To me?" His voice lowered even more. "You are someone I intend to keep alive." My breath caught. He didn't smile when he said it. He didn't flirt. He didn't soften. He meant every word. The SUV slowed as the convoy approached a long, abandoned bridge covered in rust and shadows. A guard tapped a code into a metal box near the entrance, and the structure rumbled open, revealing a hidden path beneath it, swallowing us whole. The world dimmed. Temperature dropped, and silence settled around us like a thick blanket. "Underground?" I whispered. "Yes," Lorenzo replied. "This tunnel predates the city. My great-grandfather built it during the Prohibition era." Of course he did. The convoy descended deeper, winding through dim lights and cool air until we reached a fortified steel door the size of a small building. "This is insane," I breathed. "This is survival," Lorenzo corrected. The steel door opened, and warm light spilled over us. Inside was something I didn't expect at all. A luxurious, modern safe house with soft golden lighting, wide-open rooms, giant couches, marble floors, and a kitchen larger than my entire apartment. The air smelled like fresh linen and cedar. It felt lived in, comfortable, protected. Not a bunker. Not a concrete cell. A sanctuary. The door sealed behind us with a heavy thud. I turned to Lorenzo. "So, what happens now?" He studied me for a long moment. "You stay here," he said, "until I say otherwise." I frowned. "That's not a plan. That's imprisonment."
His jaw tightened.
"It is protection. Protection that traps me?" I shot back. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming in the soft light. "Ariana," he said quietly, "you walked into danger when you saved my father. That decision bound our lives together, whether you wanted it or not." Bound our lives together. The words hit harder than I expected. Lorenzo continued. "You're not a prisoner. You are a guest under my protection. But if you walk out of here now, you will not make it to the end of the street." I swallowed hard. He was right, and it terrified me. One of the medics approached Lorenzo, murmuring quietly. "Angelo is waking up," he said. I froze. His father, the man I saved. Conscious.
Alive.
Lorenzo's expression shifted, something softening briefly behind all the steel and shadows. "Ariana," he said, turning back to me. "He will want to see you." My breath stalled. "See me? Why?" His eyes darkened with a meaning I couldn't decipher. "Because you didn't just save his life," Lorenzo said. "You changed everything. Everything." And I suddenly realized I had no idea what that meant, or what was coming next. Lucia didn't sleep. Even after the air grew still, after the boots outside her home finally retreated, after the guard detail repositioned themselves farther down her street, her mind stayed locked on two things: Enzo's warning and the silver box in her refrigerator. She sat at her kitchen table, staring at it like it was a live grenade. Her hands trembled, part fear, part exhaustion, part dread of what she might find inside. Outside, the night was unnervingly calm. No more engines. No more shouting. Just the faint hum of street lamps and the distant rhythm of guard patrols. Enzo had stayed until the early hours of morning, refusing to leave until the perimeter was secure. But he'd gone quiet toward the end, like something was breathing down his neck, something heavy, something personal. His last words replayed inside Lucia's skull. If the box has what I think it does, everything changes. And then, don't open it alone. But Lucia wasn't good at listening, especially not when fear mixed with curiosity and formed something too sharp, too loud to ignore. She took a slow breath, then another, and with fingers that still shook, she pulled the silver box toward her. The metal was cold, unnaturally cold, despite sitting in her fridge for less than an hour. It felt like it didn't belong here, like it belonged in a bank vault, or buried underground, or sealed in concrete. There were no markings, no labels, just a small engraving on the underside. For her protection. Lucia's stomach tightened. Protection? Whose protection? From what? She swallowed the knot in her throat and began to open the lid. 3 loud knocks exploded across her front door. She froze. Her heart stopped. The box slipped under her fingers. 3 more knocks, heavy, urgent, unmistakably familiar. Not threatening. Not military. Not Mafia.
But
Lucia. A voice called from the other side, low and rough. It's me. Her breath caught. She hurried to the door, unlocked it, and swung it open. Enzo stood there. Messy hair. Eyes tired. Face tense with something between anger and worry. And rain had started again. It soaked his shoulders and the edges of his shirt, making his tattoos glisten under the porch light. The same storm from earlier had returned, as if deliberately following him. You weren't supposed to be back until morning, Lucia whispered. Enzo exhaled sharply. I know, but I didn't like how I left things. He stepped inside without waiting to be asked, scanning her living room. What happened after I left? Did anyone else show up? Did anyone try to?
no.
It's been quiet. He nodded, jaw tight. Then his eyes dropped to the table and went straight to the silver box resting at its center. His entire body went rigid. You opened it? He asked.
No.
Not yet. He closed his eyes, relief and tension battling across his face. Good, he muttered. Don't open it alone. I meant what I said. Lucia crossed her arms. You said you believed it might have answers. About who attacked him. About why. It might, he said. Or it might have something worse. Worse than men shooting at us? Worse than nearly losing your father in my diner? Yes. His voice dropped lower. Worse than that. Silence stretched between them. A long, heavy, storm-laced silence. Then Enzo pulled a chair out and sat. He ran a hand through his hair, leaving it even messier. He looked younger like this. Tired. A son trying to hold the world together. Sit, he said softly.
She did.
Neither spoke for a moment. Then, Lucia, do you remember when I told you my father's enemies don't send warnings? Yeah. This, he nodded at the silver box, is a warning. Her pulse quickened. From who? That's the problem. His eyes locked onto hers. I don't know. A cold shiver slid through Lucia's spine. Then we have to open it. Enzo looked like he wanted to argue, like he wanted to tell her to leave, run, hide, disappear. But instead, he nodded once. Together, he said quietly. Lucia lifted the box. Her hands were shaking again. Enzo placed his hand beside hers, not touching, but close enough that she could feel the heat of him, grounding her, steadying her. On three, he whispered. She nodded. 1. Her breath grew shallow. 2. Her heartbeat pounded in her throat. 3. Lucia opened the silver box. Inside were 3 things: a folded photograph, a small black flash drive, a bullet etched with a name. Lucia's own name. Her fingers went numb. Enzo inhaled sharply. Dio mio. What does this mean? Lucia whispered, her voice cracking. Why would they put my name on a bullet? Because this wasn't meant to scare my father, Enzo said, eyes darkening. This was meant to scare me. She swallowed hard. Why you? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into the box and unfolded the photograph. He stared at it for 3 full seconds before his expression changed: pain, grief, and something that looked a lot like rage tightening his features. Then he turned the photograph around. Lucia's breath left her body. It was a picture of her, taken from across the street, taken without her knowing, taken 3 nights ago, just after she closed the diner. Rain on her hair,
Key in her hand.
looking tired and unaware. But there she was, alone, vulnerable, hunted. Lucia's voice trembled. Who took that? Enzo's jaw clenched. I know who took it, he said. And if the flash drive has what I think it does, then the person behind this has been watching you for months. Watching me? She whispered, horrified. But why me? I'm no one. No, Enzo growled, eyes locked on her. You're not no one. And that's the problem. Her throat tightened. What do you mean? Enzo looked at her with a fear that didn't belong to a mafia boss. It belonged to a man terrified of losing someone. My father wasn't the only one attacked, he whispered. You were meant to be the second target. Lucia's breath caught. And whoever sent this, Enzo picked up the bullet with her name on it, is telling me that the next time they miss, he closed his fist around it. They won't. The room felt smaller. The walls felt closer. The storm outside roared louder. Lucia felt something cold and sharp coil inside her chest. Enzo, she whispered. What do we do now? He looked up. His eyes, dark, intense, and suddenly full of resolve, held hers firmly. Now, he said, we find out who wants you dead. And then, he leaned in slightly. Then we make sure they never get close to you again. As Lucia stared at the photograph of herself, taken by someone she didn't know, for reasons she didn't understand, she felt a cold truth settle in her bones. Sometimes danger isn't loud. Sometimes it watches quietly first. A quiet shiver moved through her. If you were in Lucia's shoes, would you want the truth right away, or would you rather stay ignorant and safe for as long as possible? Feel free to share your thoughts below. Your perspective might surprise someone. The rain had thickened into a steady curtain, tapping softly against Lucia's kitchen windows as if trying to be let in. Enzo stood by the table, his broad shoulders tense, his expression carved from something fierce and quiet. Lucia remained seated, the silver box open before her, its contents lying like threats made physical. Her picture, her name engraved on a bullet, the flash drive that felt as heavy as a verdict. Her hands were still cold, but she felt the beginning of something else inside her now. Not fear alone, but a slow-building anger, a flicker of defiance, something rising from the center of her chest like heat. Enzo, she said softly, her voice steadier than she expected. We have to see what's on the flash drive. Enzo met her eyes, and there was a moment, just a moment, where he looked at her as if deciding whether she was ready, whether this was the moment to drag her deeper or to pull her back. But he must have seen something in her gaze, in the stillness of her posture, the stubborn set of her jaw, because his expression changed from protective to resigned, and then to determined. "Okay," he murmured, "but not here." Lucia blinked. "Why not?" "Because whoever sent this, they already breached your life once. They watched you,
Photographed you. Tracked you.
If they planted a physical threat, they could have planted a digital one too. You think the flash drive could be malware?" "I think it could be worse," Enzo replied quietly. "I think it could be a locator." A soft, involuntary chill slid down her spine. She hadn't considered that. Whoever wanted her dead had already stood close enough to capture her image in rain-softened lighting. Close enough to engrave her name onto a bullet with an intimacy that felt disturbing. Close enough to know she lived alone, locked her diner late, walked with her head lowered from exhaustion rather than fear. They knew her. She didn't know them. "Where do we go?" she asked, rising slowly. "To a place where no one follows. And no one listens." He motioned for her to grab a coat. Lucia complied, slipping into the lightweight jacket she'd tossed over the back of a chair earlier in the night. Enzo moved with quick precision, securing the silver box under his arm, scanning the windows, checking the door. His protective instinct wasn't loud or overbearing. It was a quiet, controlled vigilance that felt oddly comforting. When they stepped outside, the rain greeted them immediately. It draped the world in a soft haze, dampening the streetlights, turning everything into a muted watercolor. Two men in black coats, Enzo's guards, stood near the corner, clearing the way with a nod. Enzo guided Lucia to a black car parked a little down the block. Not a flashy car. Something forgettable.
Ordinary.
The kind of car designed specifically not to announce itself. Inside, the hum of the engine felt safe, cocooned. Enzo draped his jacket over Lucia's lap without asking, noticing she had started to shiver. "You okay?" he asked quietly. She nodded, though part of her wasn't sure. As okay as someone can be after being hunted by a stranger they've never met. A corner of his mouth twitched upward, not in amusement, but in recognition of her spirit. "You're not like people who scare easily." "I'm scared," she murmured, "but I won't let fear make me small." He turned to look at her fully, and there was something heated, something conflicted, in the way his gaze softened. "Good. Because small is exactly what they want you to feel." The drive took roughly 20 minutes, weaving through quieter roads as the rain continued to whisper against the windshield. Lucia stared out at the world passing by, the blurred storefronts, the sleeping neighborhoods, the glowing reflections on wet pavement, and wondered how everything in her life had changed so violently in the span of hours. She had saved a stranger's father. She had unknowingly stepped into a war. And now someone out there wanted to end her life because of it. Eventually, Enzo turned down an old industrial road. Most of the buildings here were relics. Factories closed decades ago, storage units long abandoned, warehouses with rusted signs. But one building stood out simply because it didn't belong to ruin. It was clean, reinforced, quiet, hidden on purpose. Enzo parked behind it. Lucia stared. "What is this place?" "An old safe house," he said, stepping out. "My father built it before I was born, back when he didn't trust anyone, not his crew, not his allies, not even extended family. A place for secrets. A place for survival," Enzo corrected. Inside, the safe house looked nothing like its exterior. Where the outside seemed forgotten, the inside was stark, precise, and meticulously ordered. Steel-reinforced walls. Thick doors with biometric locks. No windows. No signals coming in or out. The kind of room that didn't exist on any blueprint. Enzo switched on the lights. They softened the metallic atmosphere, revealing shelves of organized documents, binders, a large oak table, and what looked like an older computer setup protected by an entire fortress of offline hardware. Lucia followed him toward the center of the room, her damp jacket removed and draped over a chair. The air smelled like dust and faint oil, but it felt strangely safe, like stepping into a vault of quiet resilience. Enzo placed the silver box on the table, then powered up the offline computer. The hum filled the room like a deep breath, steadying the moment. "Sit," he said softly. Lucia culled out a chair beside him, her pulse steady but present, her curiosity beginning to outweigh the fear. Enzo picked up the flash drive. "Once I plug this in," he said, "there's no going back." "I know. And whatever we find, it might be the truth you wish you didn't know." "I'm not afraid of truth anymore," Lucia whispered. "I'm afraid of shadows." He gave her one more searching look, then inserted the drive. For a moment, nothing happened, just the hum of the machine. Then a single folder appeared. No title, no encryption, just a blank folder with a timestamp, 4 days old. Enzo clicked it. Inside were several video files, one image file, and one document labeled, "For your sins." Lucia's breath hitched. Enzo scowled. "This isn't for me." Before she could ask what he meant, he opened the image file. A still photograph filled the screen. Lucia felt the air leave her lungs. It was her diner, taken from the roof of a building across the street. A sniper's vantage point. But in the center of the image, clear, focused, impossible to misinterpret, was Lucia herself, standing outside in the alley, tossing trash into the dumpster with casual ease. The image wasn't zoomed in like a stalker photo. It was framed like a target. Enzo leaned in closer. "This angle," he muttered. "This isn't surveillance." "What is it then?" Lucia whispered, her throat tightening. "This is a kill shot lineup. Someone planned to take you out long before my father was attacked." "But why me?" she asked, the confusion deepening. "I've never wronged anyone. I live quietly. I work. I go home. You saved my father," Enzo said grimly. "And that means someone thinks you know something. Something you shouldn't. But I don't know anything." "Someone thinks you do." Lucia stared at the image again. The sight of herself unaware and vulnerable filled her with a strange mix of terror and anger. She'd lived her life believing she was invisible to the dangerous side of the world. But invisibility was a lie. She was seen. Too seen. Enzo clicked the first video file. The screen showed darkness at first, then a face leaned into frame. A man, likely mid-40s, sharp eyes, an expression like steel dipped in cold water. He wasn't masked, wasn't hidden. He wanted to be recognized. "Moreno," Enzo muttered, his voice hardening. "I should have known." Who is he? A man who doesn't forgive, doesn't forget, and doesn't miss. The man on screen began to speak. "Enzo Vitali," he said calmly. "You think you can hide behind your father's legacy, behind the organization, behind the life your bloodline built with lies and bodies. But your father stole something from me, something I intend to take back." Lucia felt a knot form in her chest. Enzo leaned closer. The man continued. "You've grown predictable, Enzo. Calculated. Careful. But you have a weakness now. A crack in your armor." The man smiled faintly. It was venomous. Her. Lucia's stomach dropped. "She has nothing to do with this." Enzo growled quietly, almost like an animal reacting to a threat. Moreno's voice went lower. "That's where you're wrong." The screen flickered to another angle, a nighttime alley, Lucia walking with her hands deep in her coat pockets. Because you care about her. And your father cares about her. And that makes her the easiest way to hurt you both. Lucia felt her chest go cold. The message ended without ceremony. No threats. No demands. Just the truth. She had been marked as a tool of revenge. Enzo stared at the blank screen long after the video stopped. Enzo, Lucia whispered. What does he want? Not money. Not blood, he said, swallowing tightly. He wants justice. His version of it. What did your father take? Enzo didn't answer at first. Then, slowly, he whispered, My father killed his brother. Lucia's mouth went dry. Why? Because his brother betrayed the family and nearly got us all murdered. Because he was selling secrets to the feds. Because he wanted the empire for himself. Enzo shut his eyes briefly. And because he and Moreno were closer than blood. Moreno never forgave us. Lucia absorbed that silently. So this is punishment. No, Enzo said darkly, eyes opening with a fire that shook her. This is war. A quiet, heavy silence settled between them, punctuated only by the hum of the machine and the distant pattering of rain. Then Lucia whispered something that surprised even her. Enzo, am I in danger because of what I did for your father, or because of how you see me? He looked at her sharply, too sharply, like the question cut deeper than she intended. A muscle in his jaw flexed. He looked away. Both, he admitted softly. You changed everything the moment you pulled him out of that diner bleeding. You put yourself in our world. You became someone he owed, someone he'd protect, and someone they knew I'd protect. His voice dropped lower, heavier. They think you matter to me. Lucia swallowed. And do I? She whispered. Enzo looked at her then, really looked, and something unspoken flickered behind his eyes. Something he didn't want to say. Something he couldn't deny. He didn't answer. But his silence said more than words. Before she could push further, he turned back to the final file, the one labeled, For Your Sins. He clicked it open. A single sentence appeared on the screen. Consider the silver box a kindness. The next one won't be. Lucia felt the breath catch in her throat. Enzo's fingers curled slowly around the edge of the table. He stood, paced once, twice. His steps slow, tense, echoing faintly off steel walls. Lucia watched him, feeling the shift in the air. It wasn't just fear now. Something deeper was unfolding, responsibility, guilt, a furious protectiveness. He finally stopped pacing and pressed his palms against the table, leaning forward. Then he spoke. We're not running. Lucia blinked. We're not. No, he said firmly. Because you don't deserve to live in fear. And because Moreno will keep coming until he gets what he wants. What does he want? You, Enzo whispered. Dead or broken or used. Maybe all three. Lucia's breath shook. Enzo. But he underestimated something. Enzo continued, raising his head, and for the first time, she saw not just the Mafia heir, not just the man carrying a century-old burden, but something raw and volcanic in his eyes. He underestimated what I'm willing to do to protect you. Lucia felt her pulse thrum in her ears. Then tell me, she said softly. What do we do now? He stepped closer. Close enough for her to feel the heat radiating from his body. Close enough that the air between them seemed to shift in temperature. Now, he murmured. Now we hunt him before he hunts you. Her breath hitched. And Lucia. He reached out, not quite touching her, but near enough that her skin prickled with awareness. You're not alone anymore. Sometimes the people who come into our lives unexpectedly turn out to be the ones who would fight hardest for us. Lucia never imagined she'd matter to anyone powerful enough to protect her. Yet here she was, caught in a war she never chose, but no longer facing it alone. If you were in Lucia's place, would you want Enzo to take the lead, or would you fight beside him? Share your thoughts. Your comment might reveal what kind of survivor you'd be. The rain had slowed, now falling in soft, rhythmic sheets that drummed against the steel roof of the safe house. Outside, the world seemed almost peaceful, a quiet contrast to the storm brewing inside Lucia's chest. She couldn't stop staring at the computer screen. The silver box lay open beside her, a tangible reminder of the danger now rooted into her life. Every second since she had seen Moreno's videos, heard his words, and understood his intent had shifted the axis of her world. Nothing was ordinary anymore. Nothing was predictable. Nothing would ever be the same. Enzo stood behind her, hands resting lightly on the edge of the table. He didn't speak, he didn't need to. His presence alone was enough to steady her. Not because she was helpless, but because the weight of his vigilance wrapped around her like a shield. She realized something then. She had never felt safe in her life. Not really, but in that moment, being near him, being part of the force that had vowed to protect her, was the closest thing to it she had ever known. "We need to move fast," Enzo said finally, breaking the silence without turning to face her. His voice carried the weight of authority, tempered by an edge of worry. "Moreno doesn't play games. He tests. He calculates. And he already knows more about you than you could imagine." Lucia swallowed, gripping the edge of her chair. He's been watching me for months."
Why?
What could I possibly have that he wants? Enzo didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned over the flash drive, opening the next file. A series of images appeared, each one taken in different locations around the city. Cafes,
Streets.
the diner, even her apartment entrance. All of them were captured without her knowledge, time-stamped, cataloged. Every movement she had made in the last 3 months had been documented. Every small habit, every path home, every moment of vulnerability recorded. And now it was weaponized against her. "He's building a map," Enzo muttered, voice low. "A guide. For the attack. Or the disappearance. Or worse." Lucia's hands trembled. He wants me dead. And he's planning it meticulously." "Yes," Enzo said quietly. "And if we don't strike first, he'll always be one step ahead." The words hit her harder than the rain on the safe house roof. She had never been part of any fight, not a real one, not a life-or-death struggle. She had lived quietly, kept her head down, done her work, gone home. Now her life had become a chessboard, and she was a pawn. Enzo turned to face her fully for the first time, his dark eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "But you're not just a pawn," he said. "Because I won't let you be." Lucia's chest tightened. I don't know if I can do this." "You've already proven you can," Enzo said, stepping closer. "You saved my father. You didn't think. You acted. That bravery, that instinct, it's rare. And it's necessary now." She felt the heat of his words settle into her like fuel. Somewhere in her chest, fear battled with something else, something fiery, something that refused to be caged. "Then what's the plan?" she asked, her voice steadier than before. Enzo gestured to the screen. "First, we identify his location. The files show patterns, times, places, shadows. He's meticulous, but not perfect. Everyone has weaknesses. Everyone leaves traces. If we analyze these carefully, we can find him." Lucia watched as he manipulated the data. Maps, timestamps, camera angles, street layouts, all flickered across the screen in a silent storm of information. Every file opened, every detail parsed, brought the enemy closer, but also revealed cracks. Moreno was organized, but predictable in his obsession. And obsession, Enzo reminded her silently, was exploitable. Hours passed in tense silence, punctuated by the occasional whisper of rain, the hum of the computer, and Enzo's quiet mutterings. The safe house felt like a temporal bubble outside the world. Time had no meaning here. There was only the hunt, the preparation, and the pulse of danger pressing against their skin. Then came the moment of revelation. Enzo froze mid-gesture, staring at a particular series of images. His jaw clenched. "There," he said finally. "See this alley? 3 nights ago." He made a mistake. Lucia leaned in. Her eyes scanned the screen. She saw it, an unguarded corner, a slight deviation in the camera's angle, a shadow that didn't belong. Small, almost imperceptible, but enough. "He's using an intermediary," Enzo continued. "Someone we haven't seen yet. He doesn't handle things personally. Not anymore. But that means we can trace that person. And tracing that person will lead us to him." Lucia swallowed hard. "So, we confront them first?" "Yes," Enzo said, his voice firm. "But not without preparation. Moreno isn't just smart, he's cruel. Every step must be precise." The words made her pulse hammer in her ears. Confrontation. A first real battle. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating. Something stirred in her chest, a raw edge of courage she hadn't recognized until now. Maybe it had been there all along, waiting for a reason to rise. Enzo looked at her, his gaze almost piercing. "Lucia, are you ready for this?" She swallowed. Her fingers brushed against the edge of the silver box, cold and heavy, like a reminder of what was at stake. "I have to be," she whispered. "I can't go back to being invisible. Not now." A flicker of something softened Enzo's expression, almost a shadow of pride. "Good," he said quietly. "Because from this point forward, nothing about your life will be ordinary again." He stood, moving toward the reinforced door, gesturing for her to follow. The safe house hummed with tension, every shadow and corner alive with potential danger. The guards were alert, but they understood something that Lucia hadn't fully grasped yet. This wasn't just protection. This was a battlefield. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and gleaming under the city's dim lights. The world seemed calm, serene even. But every sound, every movement carried the weight of potential violence. Each shadow could hide eyes. Every alley could hide death. And she would have to move through it all. Enzo led her through a back exit, silent and precise. The streets were empty, but not empty enough. Each step they took, Lucia felt the weight of the enemy watching, calculating, waiting. Every instinct screamed to run, to hide, to disappear back into the shadows of her old life. But something else pushed her forward, something stronger than fear. The determination not to be hunted, not to be powerless. The city unfolded around them like a dark canvas. Enzo guided her through winding streets, alleys, and abandoned warehouses, each location chosen for strategic advantage, each movement deliberate. It was a dance of shadows and silence, and every step forward was a statement. They would not be victims. They would act. Finally, they reached a small, deserted plaza, an intersection of empty streets, dim streetlights flickering intermittently. Enzo paused, signaling for her to stay close. He knelt, examining something on the ground, a faint smear of something too dark to identify, but meaningful to him. "This is where he's been," he whispered.
"Somewhere nearby."
Moreno's man made a move. "And now it's our turn." Lucia's breath caught in her throat. Her hands clenched at her sides. She had imagined danger before. She had lived through shadows. But now she understood the full weight of it. This wasn't about surviving a random attack. This was personal. This was deliberate. And she was in it shoulder to shoulder with Enzo. A subtle click echoed from an alleyway nearby. Both of them froze, instinctively dropping lower, shadows cloaking their figures. A man stepped out, lean, dark, cautious. Not Moreno, but someone close enough to matter. And in that instant, everything shifted. This was no longer theory. No longer preparation. This was real. This was the enemy's move, and it was about to collide with theirs. Enzo's hand brushed against her arm. "Stay close," he murmured. "And remember, every move counts." Lucia nodded, heart pounding, breath shallow but steady. She realized she wasn't afraid, not fully, not anymore. Fear was a tool. Courage was a choice. And in this moment, she chose to act, to stand, to fight, to survive. The man stepped closer, unaware they were watching. Enzo's shadow stretched along the wall, a silent predator. Lucia's pulse synced with his, a rhythm of anticipation, adrenaline, and unspoken trust. Every second was drawn out, every detail amplified. And then the moment came. Enzo moved first, fast, precise, a shadow striking from darkness. Lucia followed instinctively, her own movements guided by necessity and something deeper, the raw instinct to survive, to protect, to fight back. The world seemed to narrow, focused down to the small alley, the man in front of them, and the knowledge that every decision here could mean life or death. Every breath mattered. Every heartbeat mattered. And in the eye of the storm, she realized something she had never fully understood before. She wasn't alone anymore. And she never would be again. The night had swallowed the city completely. What little light remained came from flickering street lamps and the dim glow of distant neon signs. The rain from earlier had left everything slick, reflective, and more dangerous than ever. Lucia moved cautiously beside Enzo, her senses alert to every sound, every shadow, every breath of wind. Her heartbeat was loud in her ears, the adrenaline still thrumming through her veins from their encounter with Moreno's intermediary. Every step forward felt like moving across a tightrope stretched over a bottomless pit. They had secured the alleyway, neutralized the man who had been tracking her, and collected the first real clues leading directly to Moreno himself. But the victory was hollow. The images on the flash drive, the photograph, the bullet engraved with her name, they were not just warnings. They were promises of what was coming if they failed. Lucia felt it in her bones. Moreno would escalate. He wouldn't stop until she was either dead or broken. And for the first time, she understood just how much she had truly entered another world, a world where power, cruelty, and obsession dictated life and death. They moved in silence, Enzo leading with calculated precision, every muscle in his body taut like a coiled spring. Lucia's mind raced, not just with fear, but with the questions she had been holding back. Who was she now in this story? A pawn? A target? Or something else? And the deeper, more dangerous question, how much of herself could she afford to give? How much courage? How much trust? And how much of her heart? Enzo signaled for her to pause at the entrance to a small, abandoned warehouse. The building's facade was crumbling, windows shattered, the smell of damp wood and rust filling the air. Inside, the shadows twisted unnaturally, making every corner look alive. They moved slowly, quietly, like ghosts slipping through a world that belonged to someone else entirely. Enzo stopped in the center of the warehouse, crouched low, and held up a hand. "Listen," he whispered. Lucia strained her ears. For a long moment, there was nothing but the distant sound of water dripping and the soft scurry of rats. And then, faint but unmistakable, a voice. Moreno's voice, cold, deliberate, and unmistakable. Someone was speaking to another man, a conversation muffled, but precise enough to catch fragments. She saved him. Unexpected, but useful. Keep her alive for now. Lucia felt her stomach drop. Alive for now. There was no ambiguity in that phrase. Moreno's patience was a weapon, and he was using her survival as a calculated tool in his twisted strategy. Enzo's hand found hers, gripping tightly. "We have to move," he said quietly.
Now.
The warehouse smelled of iron and decay. Every step they took echoed unnaturally against the walls. Lucia's eyes darted, taking in every shadow, every pile of crates, every beam of broken sunlight filtering through the high windows. She felt exposed, vulnerable, yet strangely alive in a way she hadn't known before. This wasn't just fear, it was exhilaration, survival sharpened to a knife's edge. They reached the far end of the warehouse, where a small staircase led to a makeshift office. The door was ajar. Enzo gestured for her to stay behind him as he slipped inside first. He moved like a predator, silent, lethal. The room smelled of cigarette smoke and old paper. A single desk lamp illuminated a set of papers and a laptop. And then, standing by the window, turned partially away from them, was Moreno himself. Lucia's breath caught. The man was even more imposing in person than on video. Dark, cold, and unyielding, with eyes that seemed to pierce through every pretense, every lie, every hesitation. He didn't flinch, didn't acknowledge them immediately. It was as though he had expected them all along. Enzo stepped forward. "It ends tonight, Moreno." Moreno finally turned, a faint, venomous smile curling on his lips. "Does it, Enzo? Or does it begin?" Lucia's heart pounded. The threat in his voice was tangible, sharp, like a blade cutting the space between them. She felt the weight of every moment that had led her here. The diner, the silver box, the flash drive, the bullet, the rain, the shadows. Every choice, every instinct, every act of bravery had brought her to this confrontation. And she realized something terrifyingly profound. This was the first time she understood the full cost of courage. This was the first time courage demanded more than action. It demanded everything. Moreno's gaze flicked to her. "Ah," he said, dark amusement threading through his voice. "The girl."
She survived.
Against all odds. His eyes lingered, studying her, weighing her. "I expected fear.
Trembling.
Crying.
Panic.
Yet here you are." Lucia met his gaze steadily, surprising herself. She refused to shrink, refused to tremble. She had survived bullets, storms, and predators far more tangible than him. She would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her as small. "I'm not afraid of you," she said, voice trembling only slightly, but her words carried steel. "And I won't be." Moreno tilted his head, intrigued, as if evaluating a rare specimen. "Not afraid," he repeated softly. "That is unusual. Most people die of fear long before my hand ever touches them." Enzo stepped closer, shielding her subtly with his presence. "And that's why you're going to fail tonight." Moreno laughed, a sound like ice cracking. Bold words from a boy who still clings to his father's shadow. "And the girl, she seems to have forgotten her place." Fascinating. Lucia felt a fire ignite within her chest. Moreno's words, meant to intimidate, had instead stirred something deeper. Something primal. Survival instinct. Anger. Determination. She realized in that instant that fear no longer defined her. Action did. Courage did. And she would wield it, not for glory, not for recognition, but because she had no choice but to protect herself and the people who had stood for her. A sudden movement from Moreno, quick, sharp, almost imperceptible, triggered Enzo's reflexes. He lunged, the fight begun, shadows colliding in a deadly dance. The office became a storm of motion, of instinct and precision. Lucia instinctively ducked behind the desk, her hands gripping the edge, listening, calculating. Every heartbeat felt amplified. Every second stretched into eternity. And then came the realization. She couldn't just watch. She couldn't just survive. She had to act. Something deep inside her broke through, a clarity born of desperation, courage, and raw determination. She remembered her father's words from long ago, whispered when she was a child. The strength you need is already inside you. You just have to reach for it. And suddenly she understood. The instinct that had saved Enzo's father, the intuition that had kept her alive so far, the unshakable will to protect herself and others, these were her weapons. And she would use them. A plan formed in her mind, precise and dangerous. She moved silently, carefully, stepping from behind cover at the exact moment Moreno shifted his attention. With every ounce of focus, she grabbed a nearby metal rod, improvised, crude, but effective, and struck at the source of the threat Moreno had overlooked. The element of surprise was hers. The predator was momentarily unbalanced. And in that sliver of opportunity, Enzo regained control, his hands like steel, precise and lethal, moving faster than thought to neutralize Moreno's advantage. The confrontation felt endless, a blur of motion and sound, adrenaline and fear, skill and instinct. And then, just as abruptly as it began, Moreno was disarmed, cornered, restrained. The room fell into an eerie stillness, broken only by the ragged breaths of those who had survived the fight. Lucia leaned against the desk, hands trembling, chest heaving. She realized she had done it.
Survived. Fought.
Acted. And in the process, discovered the strength she had never known existed inside her. She was no longer the frightened girl who had served coffee in a quiet diner. She was someone who could stand, act, and survive even in the darkest night. Enzo came to her side, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. His eyes, dark and intense, softened slightly. "You did it," he said quietly. "You were brilliant." Lucia swallowed, feeling the weight of the adrenaline leaving her in waves, replaced by exhaustion and clarity. "We did it," she corrected softly. "Together." Enzo nodded, a small, almost imperceptible smile on his lips. "Yes, together." They stood there for a moment, side by side, in the aftermath of the storm, realizing that the darkest night had passed. And in that darkness, Lucia had found her breakthrough, courage, clarity, and a fierce determination that would no longer be extinguished. The first light of dawn broke slowly over the city, pale and hesitant, as if wary of what the night had birthed. Streets shimmered from the earlier rain, reflecting fractured neon, broken signs, and the faintest hints of shadow still lingering in alleyways. But inside Lucia, inside Enzo, there was a different kind of dawn, a quiet, hard-won clarity. The fight with Moreno had changed everything, yet it had also revealed something essential. They were no longer victims. They were fighters, survivors. And tonight that would be tested one final time. The safe house had become a command center. Maps of the city, surveillance footage, and the flash drive's contents were laid across every available surface. Enzo and his team moved like predators, preparing for a confrontation that would decide not just the lives of those present, but the fragile future that Moreno threatened to annihilate. Lucia stood beside Enzo, her hands steady now, her mind sharp. Every lesson from the previous night had etched itself into her instincts. Every fear, every terror, every moment of uncertainty had been transformed into focus, precision, and courage. She was ready, because she had no choice, not if she wanted to survive and protect the ones she had grown to care about. Enzo approached her quietly, resting a hand briefly on her shoulder. "This is it," he murmured. "Once we move, there's no turning back." Lucia nodded, her gaze fixed, unwavering. "I know," she said, "and I won't turn back." They moved out, silent and coordinated. Enzo's men flanked them, trained, lethal, shadows among shadows. Lucia kept close to Enzo, their proximity a steadying presence, a tether in a world that had become violently unpredictable. The target was Moreno's hideout, a secluded warehouse in the industrial district, heavily guarded, fortified, designed to be impossible to breach. But impossible was a challenge Enzo had accepted long ago, and now, Lucia's courage would prove just as formidable. As they approached, the tension thickened. The night was still, unnervingly so, and every step toward the warehouse made the air heavier, almost suffocating. Enzo signaled for the team to halt. He pressed a finger to his lips, a quiet command that they all understood. This was precision, not chaos. A single wrong move, a single misstep, and it could all be over. Lucia's pulse throbbed in her ears. She remembered the first time she had felt real fear. The diner, the bullet, the silver box, and how far she had come since then. Every ounce of fear had been refined into a sharp edge of awareness, every ounce of doubt tempered into readiness. She was no longer the frightened girl who hid behind doors. She was a force to be reckoned with, and she would not falter now. Enzo's voice was a whisper, low and urgent. "Stay close. Watch everything. Trust nothing until it's in front of you." He glanced at her, and for the briefest moment, his dark eyes softened. "You're ready for this. I know you are." The team moved, silent as ghosts, weaving through shadows, past stacks of crates, toward the entrance. Moreno's men were alert, but unaware of the precision of the approach. A coordinated distraction from the east side drew some guards away, allowing Enzo and Lucia to slip through the main doors. The warehouse interior was cavernous, echoing with faint movement and the quiet hum of surveillance monitors. And then, in the center, Moreno himself, flanked by a handful of loyal men, watched screens and monitors as if expecting them. Moreno's eyes locked onto Enzo the instant he entered. "So," he said smoothly, almost lazily, "you've come for me. Bold, foolish, or both?" Enzo's response was immediate, measured, and lethal. "Both," he said. "And it ends tonight." The confrontation was electric. Enzo and his team struck with precision, their movements almost choreographed, fast, lethal, unrelenting. Moreno's men were skilled, but disorganized, caught off guard by the seamless coordination of Enzo's team. Lucia stayed close, her instincts guiding her. She disarmed one man with a swift motion, using his momentum against him, while simultaneously scanning for Moreno. Her heart hammered, not with fear, but with determination. She would not let him win. Not her. Not Enzo. Not anyone who depended on her courage now. Moreno's attention finally turned to her, and a faint smile crossed his lips, dark and knowing. "Ah, the girl," he said. "Still alive. Still meddling. Fascinating. But this time, your luck ends." Lucia stepped forward, her hands empty, but her stance firm. "No," she said, voice steady. "This ends now. For you. For all the people you've tried to control, harm, or destroy." The two circled each other, predator and prey, yet neither fully fitting either role. Moreno lunged, fast and precise, but Lucia's instincts were honed. She dodged, twisted, and pushed forward, using the environment to her advantage. Every movement was calculated. Every breath, every beat of her heart, synchronized with the fight, the moment, the chance at victory. Enzo was beside her in a blink, striking with controlled force at Moreno's closest aid, creating an opening. Moreno's attention split between Enzo and Lucia, a mistake he hadn't accounted for. And in that moment, Lucia saw her chance. She moved swiftly, a combination of instinct, courage, and sheer willpower, forcing Moreno into a corner, his options dwindling. His confidence faltered just enough. Enzo approached, voice cold and unwavering. "It's over, Moreno." Moreno looked between them, realization dawning too late. He had underestimated her, underestimated the bond, the courage, the determination she had cultivated in the darkness of the night, in the crucible of survival. And now, surrounded, cornered, defeated, he felt the weight of his obsession collapsing around him. Lucia, standing firm beside Enzo, felt a rush of clarity, power, and validation. The darkness, the fear, the terror, they were behind her now. The future was theirs to claim. Moreno, defeated and restrained, glared at her. You don't understand, this isn't over." Lucia met his gaze, unwavering. "It is, Moreno. For you. Because I refuse to be your pawn." Enzo's hand rested briefly on her shoulder, pride and relief mingling in his eyes. "You did it," he said. "We did it." The aftermath was methodical. Moreno was secured, his men neutralized or fleeing. The warehouse cleared, evidence collected. Lucia, exhausted but alive, finally allowed herself to breathe. She looked at Enzo, the city skyline visible in the distance through the broken windows, sunlight beginning to break through the night's remnants. The world felt larger, freer, and filled with possibility. "You were incredible," Enzo said quietly, stepping beside her. "I knew you had courage, but tonight you were unstoppable." Lucia smiled faintly, her chest still heaving. "I had to be," she replied. "Not for me. For him. For all of us." Enzo nodded, his expression softening. "You didn't just survive. You changed the course of this story. You became more than anyone expected." The two stood in silence for a moment, the hum of the city below and the distant calls of morning life filling the air. For the first time, the weight of fear, the constant threat of violence, and the darkness of uncertainty lifted, replaced with a fragile, luminous sense of victory. Lucia knew this was just the beginning of a new chapter. But unlike before, she was no longer powerless. She had faced fear, embraced courage, and discovered a strength she hadn't known existed. And in that strength, she found not only survival, but freedom and perhaps something deeper: connection, trust, and the possibility of love with someone who had fought beside her, seen her true self, and stood unwaveringly at her side. Enzo took her hand lightly, a gesture of acknowledgement, protection, and something more. "Ready to go home?" he asked softly. Lucia looked out at the city, a world alive with light, promise, and endless possibility. She nodded. "Yes," she said. "Home, but never the same as before." And with that, they walked together, stepping into the sunlight, into a life reclaimed, into a story that had been written in fear, courage, and triumph, and ending with victory, connection, and the unshakable certainty that they could face anything together. Even when the odds seem insurmountable, courage, trust, and determination can turn fear into victory. Lucia went from being a target to a fighter, discovering strength she never knew existed, and a bond that redefined her life. If you were in her place, would you find the courage to fight and transform your fear into action? A comment below. Your story might inspire someone else to face their own battles. The city is quiet now, the storm has passed, and in the aftermath, courage has triumphed over fear. Lucia's life will never be the same, but she has discovered something far greater than survival: strength, resilience, and the power to fight for what matters most. From being a target to becoming a hero of her own story, she has shown us that even in the darkest moments, we all have the capacity to rise. If you felt the tension, the suspense, and the triumph in this story, don't let it end here. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a journey like Lucia's, full of danger, drama, and heart-pounding moments that will keep you on the edge of your seat. And before you go, tell us in the comments, what would you do if you were in Lucia's shoes? Would you fight, hide, or take a risk that changes everything? We love hearing your thoughts, and your answer might just inspire the next story we bring to life. Remember, courage starts with one step. Subscribe now and step into the story.